the Garden of Self-Love. It's a work that I find myself, I come in early in the morning, I find myself like looking at different elements because there seems to be like different concurrent stories. So I'm very excited to, hopefully Annie might be able to, tell us some of the stories and some of the elements, like some of the other works we talked about. I think really beautiful kind of pathos, and then also too really beautiful kind of humour and kind of warmth and love. So how the hell do you start even thinking about something like this, Annie?
That's a good question. That's something that I struggled with when I was going through a big change in my life. So I was brought up in a very strict religion, and I left when I was 30, so that's 10 years ago. And the impact of trauma on the brain is a lot like a stroke. So you have trouble articulating your story, and you also have trouble imagining that life can be better. So through the power of the imagination, I've been able to come up with a new style of work since that traumatic time in my life.
Yeah. And let's talk about the sort of materiality of it. Where do you source the different kind of materials? Is this like a constant ongoing kind of process and you have like an archive of stuff that you can draw upon? Or do you sort of go and seek out individual materials for a specific work?
Well, I used to work at a fabric store, and also my mother was a sewer, and we grew up in Cabramatta, which used to have a lot of fabric stores. But when I left my religious community, I had to create a new community and interact with the world in new ways. So I started putting call-outs on Facebook for fabric, and textiles is a really good metaphor for the transformation of trauma, which is what my work is about. My work is about representing post-traumatic growth, and that's a psychological concept where a person experiences positive things by using their trauma and transforming it into something positive so that they are thriving and transcending that trauma and creating something beautiful. So when you think about the act of sewing, it's a very violent action, but it's also very reparative, and it's also generative. It's creating something new. I also, when I left my former faith, I became a life model as my first act of rebellion, sort of continuing that expulsion from paradise narrative. And I would collect, I'd meet new people, go to new places, but I'd also collect, abandoned still life paintings from the art schools. So the forbidden fruit that you see here it's not just one fruit, it's multiple fruits. And in my former faith tradition, the forbidden fruit represented God's sovereignty, or his, right to rule, rather than pleasure. So I'm very obsessed with fruit, but it's meant to represent, that there are multiple ways to live, not just one, Yep.
Yeah. And what about elements like my favorite element I love is the sock snake.
Yes.
Yeah, and so is that also a biblical reference as well,
Yeah,
Annie?
that was my mum's sock. She brought me up in the religion, so it's a bittersweet kind of relationship that we had. I love my mum, but yeah, one of the things that made me think of leaving. So it's not just when someone leaves an environment like that. It's sort of like a gradual thing. And one of the things that someone said to me that really stuck out was the idea of a talking snake. So that's what I find that when people critique religion, it's sort of regurgitating that trauma. It's often violent, it's often offensive, but I prefer to talk, I think it helps to talk about things with humour and positivity.
Yeah. And it's interesting, and this is why I love artist talks and I love doing artist talks, is because you know, a lot of times when you know, particularly in this modern life, you know, we're so fast to sort of look at things and we look at the next kind of thing, and you might look at this and go, oh yeah, it's really colourful and kind of camp and, you know, blah blah blah, but then spending that time to stop and look, and this stuff starts to dawn upon you, you know, or maybe hearing from Annie and talking about the you know, the elements and the why of it, you know, the fact that this came out of post-traumatic stress, and the idea that you talked about, that there is a possibility for growth, you know, there, and what that growth can look like. But it is also to this sort of personal iconography. It's like a visual representation of your life and that kind of transition.
Yeah.
So it must be kind of strange to you know, take stock and step back and look at it once you've finished it, because you're sort of seeing your story back to yourself.
Yes. What can I say? Well, you know, if you look at pictures of paradise historically, you see the Garden of Eden is this very bright, colourful, harmonious world, and the world outside of Eden is this wasteland, basically. And that's the kind of thinking that you grow up with in a fundamentalist faith, that this world is good, the world outside is bad. But when I made the decision to leave, I found that the world wasn't this fearful place. You know, people were kind and good to me. People were generous. You know, some of it was good, some of it was bad. It was a bit of everything, and it's been. I feel that I've lived more in the 10 years since I left than the 30 years
before, yeah.
in that so-called, you know, safe place. Yeah.
And even though that period was a traumatic, you know, those 30 years, you know, brought trauma, do you also have the weird thing where there's elements of that life that you miss or that you liked, or, you know? It's a tough question. You don't have to answer.
I mean, I do miss some of my friends.
Yeah.
So part of that faith tradition is if you choose to leave, or if you've done the wrong thing, you're excommunicated, and you're not your community. The community that you grew up with, they're not allowed to speak to you. So I remember when I left, I had to tell my mum, and my mum was sick with breast cancer at the time. And at first she was reluctant to, you know, she was more afraid of what people would think of her as a parent. But she came around and she put a camera on the front door of our home. So whenever the witnesses came to check on me, you know, to see what was happening, she'd tell me to go hide in my room. So I would hide in my bedroom closet until they left, because I didn't want to be cut off from my mum, because she needed me to look after her. So I mean, all that is there, but I mean, how do you make an artwork about that experience? So I'm sorry, I don't know what the question was.
Like a lot of my questions are not really questions, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's such a beautiful thing, and I really thank you. You know, we've seen a lot of people today speak with a lot of bravery about their kind of lives and the interconnection between their art and life, and this has been another example of it. Thanks for your bravery in sharing that story. And once again, you know, I'll just finish real quick. Once again, you know, having that kind of overview really does add to the reading of the work. So thank you very much, Annie. Sorry.